So, my name is Dr. VARUN KATYAL. I'm a nutritionist and wellness expert. And today in this session, I'm going to talk about one very, very important aspect of preparation for a marathon, which is the right nutrition. Now, when one is preparing for a marathon, right nutrition and right training are two most important things which are very, very important uh, during the preparation for a marathon. And these two components, which is right training and right nutrition, are the most important components when one is preparing for a marathon. So, out of these two aspects, today I'm going to talk about the right nutrition to prepare for a marathon. Now, when we talk about the right nutrition, it is very important that when one is preparing for a marathon and when one is undergoing training for a marathon, the nutritional requirements of the body definitely increase. So it is very, very important that one needs to have a balanced and nutritious diet when one is preparing for a marathon, and one needs to have meals at regular intervals of time. So that's very, very important. Now, when we talk about the right nutrition for preparing for a marathon, the three most important components, or the three most important groups of food which are very, very important to consider are carbohydrates, proteins, and of course water. So these three aspects of nutrition, which is carbohydrates, proteins, and water, are very important to focus on when one is preparing for a marathon. Now, let's first start with the first important nutrient, which is carbohydrates. Now, as we all know that carbohydrates are very, very important for carrying out a lot of important functions in our body. They are a very, very important source of energy for our body. So when one is preparing for a marathon, the right intake of the right kind of carbohydrates becomes very, very important. Now, when we talk about the right kind of carbohydrates, when one is training for a marathon, one needs to definitely include the complex carbohydrates in one's diet, because these complex carbohydrates provide the right kind of energy to a person to be able to carry out the increased activity which is required while one is training for a marathon. Now, when we are talking about the intake of carbohydrates, one needs to remember that if one is not taking the right kind of nutrition prior to the marathon, when while one is preparing or training for a marathon, then it could cause a lot of problems. Especially it could if you are not including the right kinds of food in your diet, and if you are not taking care of your nutrition needs properly before a marathon, you could have a lot of issues. Now, that is why the importance of right nutrition while you are preparing for a marathon is there. And it's the right nutrition is a very, very vital component when one is preparing for a marathon. Now, this we when we talk about taking the right kind of nutrition while preparing for a marathon, if one does not take the right kind of nutrition while preparing for a marathon, then there could be certain symptoms which one could experience because of this, which could include chronic tiredness, muscle pulls, cramps, dizziness, even poor concentration and performance, and they could also be delayed recovery. So it's very important that one must focus on the right nutrition. So when I was talking about the three major components, which you need to definitely focus on while you're preparing for a marathon, are carbohydrates, fats, and water. Now, when one is talking about, I'm going to talk about the right kind of carbs, the right kind of proteins, in fact, as well as the hydration part a little later. But before that, it is very, very important that you need to have a balanced and nutritious diet. And the basic requirements are that you must try and include all the major food groups in your diet, especially when you're preparing for a marathon. And these major groups should be cereals, vegetables, fruits, milk and milk products, pulses or non-vegetarian food, as well as fluids. Okay. Now, one needs to understand that when we talk about, taking the right kind of nutrition while preparing for a marathon, the first component, which I had already talked about a little bit briefly in the beginning of this session, is intake of the right kind of carbohydrates. Now, when we talk about the right kind of carbohydrates, one must remember that one must include good sources of complex carbohydrates in one's diet. I'm going to give you examples. So when we talk about, complex carbohydrates, one must include grains like, whole grains like whole wheat, brown rice, quinoa, ragi, jowar, bajra. So these whole grains definitely are definitely good sources of complex carbohydrates. Even whole oats are, an example of a good source of complex carbohydrates. Besides this, one must definitely include a lot of vegetables in one's diet, because they are a very good source of complex carbohydrates. Besides that, including fruits in our diet are also very, very important. So these are some of the good sources of carbohydrates which one must include, because they're very, very important to give a person the right kind of energy, to help a person develop the right kind of endurance and strength while preparing for a marathon. Now, when we talk about carbohydrates, why they are very important are that in our body, the carbohydrates are stored in the body in the form of something called glycogen. Now, this glycogen is stored in the body, in the liver, as well as muscles. And during, our rigorous activity, when we are doing some kind of rigorous activity, these glycogen stores are then utilized by the body to provide us energy. Now, that is why it is very important to include the right kind of carbohydrates in one's diet, so that our glycogen stores are well topped up. Now, when we talk about preparing for a marathon, one thing which is very, very important is that one must know that after about 90 minutes or more of rigorous activity, the glycogen stores of the body are not enough to sustain the body. That's why around 4 to 5 days prior to the marathon, one must do something called carbohydrate loading. Now, the aim of this carbohydrate loading is to basically top up the muscle as well as the liver glycogen stores, so that one does not feel tired and fatigued, during the marathon, and one is able to maintain the high intensity of activity, especially during the longer runs. Okay, so it is therefore very, very important to do this activity of carbohydrate loading around 4 to 5 days prior to the marathon day. Okay, now also one needs to understand that in the final week before your marathon, it is very, very important that you taper down your exercise, so that your muscles get adequate rest. Because if the muscles don't get adequate rest, then the recovery of the muscles will not be proper. So it's very important that around a week prior to your marathon, which is in the final week before your marathon, you must start tapering your exercise a little bit, and you must, start giving more rest to your body so that your muscles recover properly. And at the same time, you should try and increase your carbohydrate intake by 9 to 10 grams of carbohydrates per kilogram of body weight. This is very, very important. So one must ensure that one is having the right kind of carbohydrates, which I talked to you about, which is the complex carbohydrates. And these complex carbohydrates will help one in being able to have the right strength and the right endurance, while one is preparing for the marathon. Now, on the event day, what should you eat? This also becomes very important. On the day of the event, it is important that one must have one's breakfast around 3 to 4 hours prior to the marathon, because this will ensure that you have the right kind of energy, to run your marathon, and at the same time, you are able to uh, kind of sustain your strength as well as endurance, right? Now, so on the day of the event, what all can one include in one's breakfast? One can include something like cereal or oatmeal with milk or yogurt. So you can have so for your breakfast on the day of the marathon, you can either have cereals or oatmeal with low fat milk or yogurt, along with some dry fruits or nuts. You can even have some low fat pancakes with fruits. You can even have fruit salads with yogurt. You can have baked potato with whole wheat pasta in a tomato based sauce. And you can even have something like bread with jam or honey. Okay. Now, some other options which you can include in your breakfast on the day of the marathon are some vegetable rolls with low fat spreads. You can even have vegetable sandwiches, which are made of whole wheat bread. Along with that, you can have ripe bananas. So these are some of the good breakfast options to have on the day of the marathon. But please remember that it is important that you have your breakfast around 3 to 4 hours prior to the marathon time on the day of your marathon. Now, it is very, very important that one needs to avoid a heavy breakfast, on the day of the marathon. And one should also try and eat a banana 20 to 30 minutes before the marathon. So that is also important, that one must eat a banana 20 to 30 minutes prior to the marathon. Okay. Now, it's very, very important to now also, I'm also going to talk about the second most important component, which I've talked to you about, uh, you know, uh, during the marathon, is the right kind of hydration. Now, hydration is very, very important. And why is it important? Is because while you're training for the marathon or while you are running the marathon, there is, because of more activity, there is a lot of perspiration or sweating, especially in warmer environments. And this makes it very, very important that we take care of our hydration well, so that our body is well hydrated, and even our electrolytes are well balanced in the body. So when one is training for the marathon, one must have adequate amount of water. Along with that, one can also include other fluids like coconut water, soups, buttermilk, etc. during the training days. Also, uh, while you are on the run, to kind of compensate for the lost electrolytes in the sweat, because when you sweat, you along with the sweat, you also lose certain electrolytes like sodium, potassium, and chloride. And so, to replenish these electrolytes, one can have it's very important that one can have an electrolyte balancing sports drink. So because when you are sweating, along with the sweat, you also lose certain important electrolytes like sodium, potassium, and chloride. So to replenish these electrolytes, one should have uh, electrolyte balancing uh, energy drink. And one should have an electrolyte balancing sports drink, which can help to basically replenish the lost electrolytes. Now, this is very important, and that's why I'm again and again stressing on this, because when we are training for the marathon, because of the intense activity, there can be perspiration and sweating, and while we are sweating or perspiring, there is loss of important electrolytes from the body, especially important electrolytes like sodium, potassium, and chloride. And so to compensate or to replenish these lost electrolytes like sodium, potassium, and chloride, during sweating, it is very important that one has an electrolyte balancing sports drink, while one is on the run. Also, one needs to avoid alcohol and excess of tea and coffee consumption during the training. Okay, this is very, very important. Also, one should it's very important to remember that one should avoid fruit juices while on the run, because the common symptoms of citric acid overdose could be things like muscle cramps or even muscle pain. So that's why fruit juices should be avoided while you are on the run. So it is very, very important that you keep yourself well hydrated and you take care of your hydration needs in the right way. So ideally, a marathon runner needs to consume at least 2 glasses of water before training and run to avoid, the injuries. That's very, very important. So ideally, a marathon runner needs to consume at least 2 glasses of water before training and runs to avoid injuries. Marathon runners whose water consumption is not proper or is less may face dehydration, and apart from dehydration, they can also face headache, head stroke, fatigue, and this dehydration can be fatal on the run. So this is very important that you need to take care of your hydration needs very, very well while training as well as while you are on the run. Okay. Now, on the day of the event, one needs to maintain hydration by drinking at least 2 glasses of fluid or water with your pre-event meal. That is when you're having your breakfast in the morning around 3 to 4 hours prior to your marathon time. You can have at least 2 glasses of fluid or water. So you can have at least 2 glasses of water or fluid along with your pre-event meal, and then continue to drink water up to the start time. So a marathon runner can have a glass of water 30 minutes prior to the run and 1 glass before one takes the flight. Okay, so this is very important that a marathon runner can take a glass of water 30 minutes prior to the run and 1 glass before one takes flight. Okay, now once the race starts, the runners need to drink according to their thirst, and one should avoid drinking more water than required, as this would result in more bathroom halts while on the run. Okay, so this is very important. Now coming to the third important component which I talked to you about in the nutritional requirements while training for a marathon or while preparing for a marathon, which is the right kind of protein. Now one needs to have the right kind of protein sources in one's diet, because the right kind of protein will ensure that you have your muscle mass is well maintained, your muscle tone is well maintained. Also, it also ensures that if there are the injury to the muscles and the tissue is repaired properly. Also, the right kind of intake of protein ensures that it helps to improve your immunity and also the satiety factor of the body. Okay, so it is very important to include the right kind of protein in one's diet. And when we talk about the right kind of protein, if you are a vegetarian, then you can have milk and milk products like paneer, curd, in your diet. If you eat eggs, then of course eggs are a great source of good quality and high quality protein. You can, if you're a non-vegetarian, then you can definitely consume chicken, fish in your diet as good sources of protein. Also for vegetarians, you can include soya, and tofu in your diet, because that is also a good source of protein. Okay. Now, so this was about protein intake. One must remember that besides this, of course, one definitely also needs to consume sources of good fat in one's diet. And one must focus on consuming good sources of fat in one's diet. And when we talk about good fat, the examples of good fat are nuts like almonds and walnuts, olive oil, seeds like flax seeds, chia seeds, sunflower seeds, and pumpkin seeds. So these are some of the examples of good fats which one must include in one's diet. Okay. Now, moving on to a few tips, which can be helpful for someone who's preparing for a marathon. The first and foremost is that one must try and maintain a healthy body weight. Okay. And one must try and avoid excess fats, salt, and spices in the diet. This is very, very important. Also, one thing which is very important is that on the day of the event, or on the day of the marathon, you should try and not include any kind of new foods in your diet. In fact, even on the night prior to the marathon, you should try and avoid eating any new foods, because you never know, sometimes you may have an upset stomach, etc. So you should try and avoid any kinds of new foods at least a day prior to the marathon, and definitely on the day of the marathon. That's very, very important. And also, it is very important that you take proper rest, because if your muscles, are not well rested, and if the muscles have not recovered properly, then you are definitely going to be in a problem. So it is very, very important that you take proper rest and give proper rest to your body before the marathon. In fact, even while you are training for the marathon, it is very important that you give proper rest to your body, so that your muscles are well rested and your muscles recover properly. Okay, so this is very, very important. So these are some of the things which I wanted to talk about, which could be of help for you, especially when you are preparing for a marathon. So like I said, when one is preparing for a marathon, two most important things to consider are the right training and the right nutrition. And in today's session, I talked about some of the tips on right nutrition, which could be helpful to you while you are preparing for a marathon. Okay, so thank you very much, all of you, for your patient listening. I would just like to once again tell you that in today's session, we talked about what is the right nutrition one must have while one is preparing for a marathon. Okay, so hope you enjoyed this session. Thank you very much, all of you, for your patient listening. Thank you, and have a great evening ahead.